Good evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, April 25th. The White House has indicated that it could lower its tariffs on China, but experts say that the exact figures might not make much of a difference. Right now, the U.S. has 145% blanket tariffs on Chinese goods, while China has a 125% rate on U.S. goods. The levies jumped to those levels earlier this month when both countries were exchanging in a tit-for-tat raising of rates. U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters during a news conference that tariffs would come down substantially but won't disappear completely.
Earlier today, Treasury Secretary Gusson suggested that with the tariff rates as high as they are now, it's effectively an embargo of trade between the United States and China. Do you see it that way?
That's true. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high.
What level do you think it'll come down to if you have it?
It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero. We were just destroyed. China was taking us for a ride, and just not going to have. It's not going to happen. We're going to be very good to China. Have a great relationship with President Xi. But they would make billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, and they would build their military out of the United States and what they made. So that won't happen. But they're going to do very well, and I think they're going to be happy, and I think we're going to live together very happily and ideally work together. So I think it's going to work out very well. But no, it's at 145%. It will not be anywhere near that number.
With just a few days left in this race, the conservative leader is making stops in ridings that polls show will likely be won by members of his party. The itinerary includes Saskatoon, where Mr. Poilievre held a press conference this morning.
We have a plan to fix it. Our platform, Change for an Affordable Life, for Safe Streets, for Canada First, lays out a very clear path to bring home the Canadian promise. Let me walk through it for you, my friends. First of all, we are going to cut $50 billion of bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, and other waste. To bring down the deficit, the inflation, and the tax burden. In fact, we will cut the deficit by 70%. The Liberal deficit that they will leave behind will be cut down by 70%, and we will be on path to getting towards a balanced budget. Second, we will cut income tax by 15%, so your hard work pays off again.
However, many commentators have pointed out that campaigning in Saskatchewan is an interesting choice, given that all three ridings in Saskatoon are generally considered safe seats for the Conservatives. Our correspondent Wyatt Sharp has more.
Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre has actually spent 2 days in Saskatchewan. He held a rally in Saskatoon last night, and then this morning he held a press conference where he spoke to reporters. And, people are questioning the strategy behind this, given that Saskatchewan has usually been considered a very safe kind of province, and certainly all of the ridings in that province, all 18 of them, have generally speaking been considered safe for the Conservatives. You don't usually see the Conservatives going there, or if you do, it might be, in some kind of a victory lap type form to try and enthuse and try and get their base to actually go out and vote. But Pierre Poilievre very much doing it for different reasons. Some of the internal polling that various reports are suggesting from the Conservative Party has indicated that they're actually not performing too strongly in Saskatchewan. And it's part of a broader trend, obviously, since Mark Carney took over the leadership of the Liberal Party and since kind of the tariffs and the economic threats ensued shortly thereafter. The Conservatives have really been struggling not just in Saskatchewan and the prairies, but really across the country. And another indication of that is the central campaign team for the Conservative Party rerouting essentially some of their volunteers to go and campaign in the riding of Carleton, which is actually Pierre Poilievre's own seat that he's held since 2004, which kind of just lays down the fact that they really are kind of nervous that Pierre Poilievre could lose his own seat, which is something that not a lot of people would have anticipated, even in January when the Conservatives were ahead by about 20% in the polls to the Trudeau Liberals. And certainly in a province like Saskatchewan, it was almost certain that they were going to win all of the seats in Saskatchewan. Right now, they have all the seats in Saskatchewan. And so, provincially, obviously the NDP has a number of seats in Saskatchewan, especially in kind of that Saskatoon area. So maybe they're getting concerned that some of those provincial NDP voters might start to cross over and vote for the federal NDP as well, because Saskatchewan is a fairly non-liberal province, if I can say. They generally speaking don't vote with the Liberals, and the NDP has really been struggling right now. It's kind of just as we get into the final days of the campaign, there's a lot of questions as to why he's not spending time in Quebec, where he's also struggling, in kind of the core GTA, where the Liberals are looking as if they could sweep that area. And then again, in Ottawa as well, where the Liberals are looking as if they could also kind of take a major sweep to that region as well.
The Liberal leader made an announcement at the Algoma steel plant in Sault Ste. Marie this morning. Algoma is one of the companies hit by U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel. Mark Carney went over some of the major points of his platform with a focus on relief for tariff-exposed industries.
As Terry just emphasized, Algoma builds what Canada needs right now, what Canada needs for the future: steel. We need steel to build our rails and our transportation lines, to build out our energy infrastructure. We need steel to build our autos, steel to build our ships. We need high quality, Canadian-made steel to build greater prosperity. And how you build it, how you build that steel also is what Canada needs right now. With ambition, with innovation, a willingness to work hard and work smart. We are literally weeks away from the first test run of the electric arc furnace line, which is going to take 70% of the carbon out, a huge investment that's been made alongside the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario. This is how we build Canada strong, and that will never happen. We will stand with the auto workers, with the forestry workers, the aluminum workers, and above all, the steel workers. We will stand with every single Canadian worker targeted by President Trump's attacks on our country. We will stand with you. And crucially, we will fight, protect, and build. We have implemented our own counter tariffs, which will cause maximum damage in the U.S. and have only minimal impact here. On steel and aluminum, our tariffs match fully the scale of the U.S. assault. And we are returning all of the proceeds, every dollar, from those tariffs to protect our workers and the businesses that are most affected by this trade war.
Mr. Carney took focus on the campaign trail in Coquitlam, BC on Thursday after coming under fire from party leaders and the press about not being forthcoming about what happened on the March 28th phone call with Donald Trump. And Mr. Carney is now saying that Mr. Trump talked about Canada becoming the 51st state during their first bilateral call last month.
To be clear, as I've said to anyone who's raised this issue in private or in public, including the President, that it will never happen. And the President and I, when we spoke, we agreed that Canada and the United States, as sovereign nations, would begin negotiations on our economic and security relationship following the federal election. And I think the President's comments yesterday and before that just underscore how important the choice that Canadians have on Monday: who can stand up to President Trump, who can build Canada strong, who has the experience in order to do that. That's the crucial choice that Canadians need to make. As I just said, the President brings this up all the time. He brought it up yesterday, he's brought it up before. There's a difference between the conversation that was held between leaders of government, which was this conversation, and a discussion that led directly to an agreement that as sovereign countries we would have negotiations about our partnership following the election on Monday.
An Ontario judge has declared a mistrial in the sexual assault case of 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team. The trial began Wednesday, and the first witness only briefly took the stand before testimony was put on hold for legal arguments that took place in the absence of the jury. An Ontario Superior Court justice brought jurors back this morning and informed them that they were being discharged. A new trial will now be held for Michael McLeod, Carter Hart, Alex Formanton, Dylan Dubé, and Cal Foote. They were charged in connection to an alleged incident that took place in a hotel room 7 years ago. All of them have pleaded not guilty to sexual assault. All right, coming up after the break, the federal Green Party launches a court challenge over its leader being excluded from the 2 leaders' debates. After that, 2 Liberal premiers signed an agreement to reduce trade barriers, aiming to mitigate economic threats posed by Donald Trump's tariff plan. We'll have these stories and more news when we return, so please stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after this. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says that a vote for his party will keep healthcare, the environment, as well as labor and treaty rights off the table when new trade talks begin in Washington.
So people here in Toronto, you actually have the power to change that. You can send New Democrats to Ottawa to stand up and fight for you, to stand up and defend you. So if you believe, like Claire was mentioning, if you believe that we should bring down the price of food by bringing in a price cap on food essentials, then vote NDP. If you believe that we should take on corporate landlords and ban them from buying up affordable homes, vote NDP. If you believe in defending our universal public health care, then vote NDP. Everything that we have in this country, the Canadians are proud of. If you ask a Canadian what they're proud of, they say our universal health care. They say their pensions. They say they're proud of our old age security. They're proud that in Canada, we take care of one another. All those things happen because people voted for New Democrats and sent us to Ottawa.
At a stop in Winnipeg, Mr. Singh again touched on his party's success in pushing the minority Liberal government to make strides. And a small crowd welcomed Mr. Singh in Toronto last night, where the NDP leader told those gathering that it is unlikely that the Conservatives will form government. Mr. Singh repeated the line this morning during a campaign event, adding that, quote, the priorities of the other parties aren't the right priorities for Canadians.
Because New Democrats we believe fundamentally, and I know you all believe this as well, we are better off when we take care of each other. We are stronger when we look out for one another. We are better off and stronger when we lift each other up. That's what makes us Canadian. And so the next budget is going to set out those priorities so we can actually look out for one another and take care of each other. Now, here's the concern, though. We know that the priorities of the other parties aren't the right priorities for Canadians. We know that Pierre Poilievre, right, he wants to cut the things that Canadians need. He's made it really clear. He wants to cut healthcare, cut investments in the things that you need like childcare, dental care, pharmacare. He's going to cut the things you need, and it's going to make life even more expensive. But the good news is Canadians are rejecting Conservatives.
The Green Party is launching a court challenge over the last-minute decision to exclude Jonathan Pedneau from the 2 leaders' debates. The Greens are asking the federal court to declare the decision to disinvite the co-leader a violation of procedural fairness. The Leaders' Debates Commission said that the Greens had failed to meet 2 of 3 participation conditions. In its federal court submission, the Green Party says that it wants the court to declare that the commission violated principles of procedural fairness. Our correspondent Wyatt Sharp unpacked this further.
The federal Green Party is going to court over their exclusion from the Leaders' Debate, both in French and English, by the Leaders' Debate Commission. Of course, the debates took place last week, and the Green Party and its leader, Jonathan Pedneau, who was said to have been, told that he was going to be representing the party at these debates, he says that he was told the morning of the French debate that the Green Party would be excluded from both of the debates. And at the time, the commission's reasoning for this was essentially saying that that because the Green Party emphasized the fact that they were not going to be putting candidates in all 343 ridings for purposes of strategic voting, that was something that, in essence, was disqualifying them from participating in the leaders' debates. You know, you're getting a lot of questions, too, people kind of speaking in favor of the Green Party, saying, well, look, you know, the Bloc Québécois even does not run candidates in all of the country. And you could argue that that is also for strategic purposes, given they only run candidates in Quebec. Now, the Leaders Debate Commission, of course, had an answer for that as well. But what's really interesting is just kind of the chaos that ensued after the debate itself. There was not a lot of post-debate analysis with respect to the actual debate itself. You know, we were talking last week on the show even about the issues that ensued from Rebel News and kind of some of the back and forth and the behind the scenes aspects of it. And it's interesting just that, again, the commission has been the ones in the spotlight. You know, Michel Cormier had to answer. He's the executive director of the Debates Commission for why they excluded the Greens from the debate. He was asked that by David Cochrane on Power and Politics on CBC. And again, he really failed to provide kind of an adequate answer, or at least an answer that many people felt was adequate. He just essentially said, you know, we called them. We weren't aware of their comments as to why they were withholding candidates in all of the ridings. And people were wondering, well, you know, surely you had to be kind of aware of that before the morning of the debate. Again, he completely denied that, but it's interesting. And, you know, it kind of poses the fact that maybe the Green Party will have a case in court, given the fact that they were excluded at the last minute. And obviously a lot of dollars goes into kind of a debate prep. You have to hire consultants to help you prep for it. And so the Green Party not only would have done that, they would have brought probably a bunch of volunteers to the Montreal area as well in order to help them get ready for the debate. And then again, the commission telling them the morning of that they weren't going to be allowed can set the stage for kind of an interesting dynamic and battle between the commission and the federal Greens.
2 Liberal premiers signed an agreement to reduce trade barriers, aiming to mitigate economic threats posed by Donald Trump's tariff plan. New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt and Newfoundland and Labrador's Premier Andrew Furey put pen to paper on a deal that will allow workers and goods certified in one province to be given clearance in the other.
I hesitate to show any gratitude to President Trump for anything, but we were already working together with respect. The physician credentialing, for example, occurred before President Trump. In fact, it was the early days of the Biden administration. I think the rise of President Trump's second administration has led all Canadians to focus more acutely on what makes sense for the country and specifically for the region in which they live, with a degree of posture of defense in order to protect what is truly Canadian, not the least of which, in fact, what the most important of which is our values. And there is no question that while we don't share a border specifically with New Brunswick, we share the values with the people of New Brunswick. We share the Canadian ideals with the people of New Brunswick.
And while speaking at the Canada Growth Summit on Thursday, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced that the province has made agreements with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick to support free trade between the provinces, and that there is an open call for every other province and territory in Canada to do the same.
We need to tear down red tape, unlock our resources, unleash our economy, and make Ontario and Canada the best place in the G7 to invest, create jobs, and do business. We need to stand on our own 2 feet so we can protect Ontario both from the immediate tariff threat and decades to come. And that's exactly what our government is doing. First, we're tearing down barriers that stop free trade within Canada and cost our national economy $200 billion every single year. Earlier this month, we introduced historic new legislation to make it easier for people from the rest of Canada to buy and sell and work in Ontario. And we're inviting every single province and territory to join us. In fact, we've already signed agreements with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia to support free trade and movement among our provinces. And the other provinces are coming along one after the other. I'm getting phone calls because it's common sense. No one wants to be left behind.
While sitting down with CPAC for a fireside chat, Mr. Ford began by unpacking the topic of interprovincial trade.
With interprovincial trade, and it's been raised more than once here. You raised it yourself in this speech. Where are we on that? You know, we've heard Mark Carney through the course of this campaign talking about July the 1st, by then things will be unlocked.
Yes.
What's your measure of where we are right now?
Well, I think everyone wants it, but there's a lot of protectionism, and that's what's happened over the years, and they want exceptions. And we led the country in getting rid of all exceptions. You know, if an electrician has his license in wherever, BC or Alberta, they should be good enough to practice in Ontario. Or if a doc or a nurse gets their license in wherever, Nova Scotia, they should be able to practice anywhere in the country. And that's exactly what we're doing. So they're coming on board. I'm getting calls every single day, especially after they see Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Had our friend from PEI call up, Saskatchewan, Alberta. They're all going to come on board. And we just can't have any exceptions. And what I mean by that, well, we're going to join, but we have 2 or 3 exceptions. No, we have to open it right up. And as Ontario, the largest market, they should be doing cartwheels to say, hey, we have an opportunity to go after the largest market in the country and one of the largest markets in North America.
The Vatican says more than 90,000 people have paid their respects to the late Pope Francis. That's after so many people lined up to his body lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica that the Vatican kept the doors open overnight. The lines of mourners waiting to pay their last respects have continued to file past his coffin. Francis died on Monday at the age of 88. Coming up after the break, we speak to an assistant professor at Simon Fraser University about new AI-powered wearable technology helping stroke victims. And we'll have our weekly energy update with Canadians for Affordable Energy. After that, we'll give you a recap of last night's NHL playoff games. We'll have these stories and more of today's top national and international headlines right after these messages. A pioneering new study is using AI-powered wearable technology to reduce fall risks for stroke survivors. We spoke with the head of the Movement Neurorehabilitation and Neurorepair Laboratory at Simon Fraser University about the timeline for integrating this innovative software into wearable devices.
It's a long process. I think the software is the first step. Of course, now we have to build some partnerships with the industry and try to expedite the development of the product. And it's pretty feasible. If you think about smart watches and smart technology, nowadays we have all sorts of measurements that we can get from our smartwatch. For example, we can have a number of steps. We can have even atrial fibrillation to understand, your heart, health and things like that. So I envision this software being, embedded in, like smartwatches or things that we're using nowadays. Pretty soon, it's just a matter of securing the grants. And, as I mentioned before, it takes some time. So we're working hard to, further advance the project. But I know we have everything we need right now. So it's just a matter of making it happen. Yeah.
We also discussed the challenges his team is tackling to ensure the technology works effectively for those with balance issues from conditions like vertigo or spinal injuries.
We have a software, we have the technology, but now the software can learn with different people, right? So each people is unique. And with time, let's say someone has a different type of problem. Let's say someone has a stroke or even someone with Parkinson's disease. And we know people with Parkinson's disease, feel very, the symptoms of the disease are, exacerbated in crowded spaces, for example. So we think that with the technology, learning about each patient, it will enable a more precise, let's say a more precise, information for that particular person.
Finally, we asked about how doctors can use the software's mobility data to create personalized rehabilitation plans.
It's all about safety, right? So right now we can measure, as I mentioned before, the number of steps. The number of steps are very important for understanding the amount of activity or amount of rehabilitation that the patient is getting. But now with this new technology, physiotherapists and physicians, they can understand, movement in terms of safety as well. So I really envision this as, people that are at risk of falling or even people that have a history of falling. So physiotherapists and physicians, they can, monitor the quality of the movement, and if the person is is putting it's herself or himself at danger during the activity. So it's a new sort of flavor for the smart textiles, the smart technology that we now know. We can measure the amount of activity, we can measure heart health and things like that. But now we're thinking really about safety at people that are at risk of falling, right? Someone that has already felt before, or that has a high risk of falling. And this person can now get some tailored advice from doctors and physiotherapists about the safety of the movement they're executing.
Canadians' interest in buying an electric vehicle has fallen for a third year in a row. That's according to a report by AutoTrader, which surveyed 1,800 people on its website. It found that 29% of respondents say that they would exclusively consider buying an EV, marking a significant drop from 40% last year. Now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. All yours, Dan.
Thank you for that, Teresa. And we're looking at a very interesting week, not just on the energy front, but obviously all things political and about the election on Monday, the 28th of April. And hope everybody gets out to vote. While they're doing that, they may find a little bit of discomfort as prices are starting to mount a bit of a comeback. Yes, prices may have come down because the federal Liberals have temporarily paused the carbon tax. I'll talk about that in a moment because they plan fully to restore it, and you're going to pay for it right after the election. So take advantage of this while you can. What we're seeing across the country, though, is very interesting. Prices seem to be moving back up from the high $50s to the low dollar to mid $60s in Vancouver. The rest of British Columbia has seen about a 3-cent increase on the wholesale side in the past week. So that means places like Kamloops and Kelowna, Prince George have sort of seen prices move back from the very comfortable $1.40, $1.50 range up to $1.55 for Alberta. Low $20s, Calgary, Edmonton, places in between, with some gas stations offering it less than that because they hide their retail margins. God knows how they can do that, but I guess it's all the beef jerky that's selling in store. Nevertheless, they're seeing about a 2-cent increase on the wholesale side, as is Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where without the provincial government, really suppressing the provincial sales tax, you're now paying the $1.26 to $1.28 range. And in Ontario, we've seen prices over the past week creep up a little bit from the low $30s to about $1.37. And of course, same for Quebec, which is 30 cents a liter more because, of course, they still have a carbon tax. And of course, those out there who think it's a great thing, well, they can continue to pay for it. The gulf between Ontario's diesel prices and diesel prices in Quebec is now in some instances as much as 40 cents a liter. So you can imagine transport companies, which are headquartered in Quebec, are now buying all their gasoline in Ontario or the diesel in Ontario. How long before, of course, they turn around and say, well, maybe it's not worth having our head offices in Montreal, might as well make it back in Ontario. Those are the effects of just some of the effects of having a disparity in prices. And it speaks to what's happened in Canada over the past few years as we've tolerated governments adding 20, 30 cents a liter in carbon taxes and weak Canadian dollar. Atlantic Canada's seen about a 4-cent decrease. They're likely to see over the next week probably an increase of about 2-3 cents. They saw a 4-cent increase. They're about to see another 2-cent increase as we head speed towards the May 2-4 weekend in Canada and the Memorial Day long weekend. A couple of factors are at play here. One, demand is very strong. Despite those who are really nervous and bedwetting, call it what it is, over the idea that tariffs are somehow going to cause everything to slow down and prices will plummet, that nothing could be further from the truth. And we all know that tariffs are not inflationary. That's not to say it's a good thing, but whether it be a tariff by the Trump administration or whether it be by 7 years of accepting, as Canadians have, carbon taxes and other disruptions to the flow of our number one export, oil and gas, and our number one breadwinner when it comes to revenues made in this country. If Canadians tolerate the destruction and the locking in really of that industry, then tariffs should be a no-brainer and pretty simple for most people to tolerate. Of course, we're looking at the increases across the country, which will likely take place between 2 and 3 cents a liter. But all eyes are going to be focused on what happens on Monday. And I want to be really, really clear with people, not just as a Liberal member of Parliament of 18 years, someone who took the consumer file for many years on behalf of the Liberal Party, but also someone who wrote the Liberal Committee gas report. Teresa, I'm going to show that to you here. In 1998, yeah, that was me. A young enterprising MP when Liberals truly cared about the cost of living and weren't prepared to play these short-term games of giving you a temporary reprieve on these massive taxes that they've advocated and certainly enjoyed, and have people like Stephen Guilbeault and the other Minister of Natural Resources, Wilkinson, who absolutely love taxes and think they're a great thing. So what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax because they know it's unpopular. It's the most efficient, according to their economists, many of them who've been purchased by the Liberal Party over the years and given handsome amounts of money, have always said it's the most efficient way in which to have a carbon tax. Well, now they're going to have to find a secondary alternative to that because they can't do it without the revenue. We know, Teresa, that the federal government didn't get rid of the CRA or those responsible for the civil servants who've been hired for the carbon tax program. And we also know that the enabling legislation is very much in place. So by stroke of a pen, or maybe a Sharpie, as we saw with Mark Carney back last month, or when he decided to suspend temporarily the carbon tax, we're going to get an industrial carbon tax. That will hit everyone. That will hit industry, that will hit farmers, that is going to hit manufacturing, that is going to hit everyone sooner or later with much higher prices as the government wants to get back to that $1.70 range, or rather $170 a ton range. We were at currently at 95. And to get there, it means that if you think by voting Liberal, you're going to see the suppression of these carbon taxes, you're either dreaming Technicolor or I can get you a great deal on last winter's snow, because you're going to be conned here in a very big way. The carbon tax, the industrial carbon tax, will have two effects. One, driving up the cost of producing in Canada. Second of all, likely leading to some businesses decided to throw in the towel and go somewhere else and then import or re-import their product into Canada. Of course, the Liberal plan is also to bring in the border adjustment mechanism, which will mean that if you try to import from a country that doesn't have a carbon tax, well, you're going to have one imposed on you, or at least call it a tariff. So all those folks who like their Dollarama's and their their Walmarts and want to save money, guess what? You start buying products from China, which are much cheaper, you're going to wind up with a major tax on, because China, like many other jurisdictions around the world, don't have a carbon tax. Don't think it's a very wise thing to begin with. Nevertheless, there are many other aspects of this that are going to affect your bottom line. And over the course of the next year, many of you are going to be really, truly regretting your vote for the Liberal Party. And I can't be more emphatic about that. I have nothing to hide here. I've been very clear. EV mandates, carbon taxes would hurt, and they did. Those who ignored me in 2018, 2019, and put aside my warnings are now faced with a significant problem, an economic challenge, one that they can't make ends meet.
All right, don't go anywhere. Coming up next, the first 10 beds of BC's involuntary treatment program have opened. So please stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. The first beds of British Columbia's involuntary treatment program have come online. Premier David Eby announced that the 10 beds located in the South Fraser Pretrial Centre would begin taking patients with overlapping mental health and substance use disorders or brain injuries. This treatment centre will focus solely on patients who have come into contact with the justice system.
Here in Surrey, it's a provincial correctional institution. And incredibly important and core to the announcement that we're making here today. But I'll take a step back. Here in BC, and not just in BC, but across North America, we've seen the impact of synthetic opioids, incredibly powerful drugs that have killed people in unbelievable numbers. And for those that it doesn't kill, when people overdose, they often end up with serious brain injuries. The combination of serious addiction and mental health issues has really created a new cohort of patients, of people who need care in our province. And often they're not able to ask for help for themselves. They're too deep into their addiction, they're too deep into the mental health issue. And so what happens is they continually cycle in and out of prisons, involvement in crime, and then back into prison, and they don't get better. They just continually struggle and often then ultimately die. It's my commitment to British Columbians that we were going to find a way to do better for people who are struggling in this way, for their safety, for their health, to try to get them back on track, find a way to rebuild their lives, but also for the safety of the broader community. The safety of people in our province, because for a small cohort of these individuals, they are involved in crime that compromises the safety and the comfort of people in our province. Today we're announcing that at the Surrey pretrial facility, the 10 beds that we committed to opening for involuntary mental health and addiction care within the Surrey pretrial facility are open. These beds are opening for men who are in the pretrial facility, who are struggling with serious mental health and addiction issues, that have brought them into contact with the criminal justice system, and that are in mental health crisis within the prison itself. By having this facility within the pretrial center, it gives us the opportunity to intervene, to ensure that they are stabilized and supported, and for those who can't be stabilized, that they get the additional care that they need. It is my sincere hope that this facility, along with additional facilities that we are working on across the province, will provide the justice system, will provide individuals struggling in this way and communities with the answer to that question. The health care will be available, the interventions will be available, and that we will be able to ensure safety for people who are sick and need our help, but also provide that safety and that reassurance to the broader community that we are intervening and making a difference. This is not the whole answer. This is just part of a broader piece of work that Dr. Vigo is doing. It started with a direction to physicians and nurses working in hospitals and emergency rooms so that they know clearly what their options are in terms of intervening when someone shows up who needs involuntary care at our hospitals.
Members of a First Nation in BC are in New York at the United Nations, calling on the provincial and Canadian governments to step up support in the battle against the toxic drug crisis. The Chilcotin Nation chief says they're asking for help to address the crisis in their own way through culturally centered programming, supportive housing, improving access to treatment and recovery services. Chief Williams says that the basic needs for their members must be met in order to stop their people from falling into using drugs. A 27-year-old man has been sentenced to 5 months in jail for smuggling people across the border from British Columbia. The U.S. District Attorney's Office in Seattle says that the Indian citizen who lives in California was indicted, alongside 3 other people. The group was connected to at least 2 attempts at smuggling across the border between BC and Washington state in late 2023, involving 8 Indian citizens. The U.S. District Judge ordered the man to serve 3 years of supervised release after jail, noting that he will likely be deported following his term. A Quebec Superior Court judge has invalidated the provincial government's tuition hike for out-of-province students. The ruling also overturns a new requirement that 80% of out-of-province undergraduate students at English language universities reach an intermediate level of proficiency in French by the time they graduate. Quebec has officially passed a law requiring doctors to work in the public healthcare system for 5 years after obtaining a medical degree in the province. Bill 83, adopted on Thursday by a vote of 72 to 30, is intended to improve access to health care for Quebecers by preventing doctors from leaving the public system for the private system. Health Minister Christian Dubé said in a statement, quote, "The universal healthcare system financed by the people of Quebec must enable everyone to consult a doctor when they need to." A commercial kitchen company in Calgary has pleaded guilty to 4 charges after a massive E. coli outbreak at daycares led to hundreds of children falling ill. Fueling Minds Incorporated was charged in relation to the outbreak that started in September 2023. There were at least 448 infections, with 39 children and 1 adult being hospitalized due to the severe illness. It became the largest known outbreak in children under 5. Court heard prosecutors are not proceeding with charges against the company's 2 directors. Donald Trump said on Thursday that Russia has offered a significant concession in peace talks with Ukraine by not taking the whole country. Responding to a reporter's question about what Russia was offering in peace talks, Mr. Trump simply responded by saying, "Stopping the war."
Using a lot of pressure on both. If you think we're just in there because we're nice people, and we are nice people, but we're using a lot of pressure on both.
What concessions, Mr. President, and to your national security team, what concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, stopping taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
And And President Trump answered reporters' questions before flying to Italy for Pope Francis's funeral, where he said he will be speaking with a lot of foreign leaders on several issues.
I spoke to him numerous times. So we're leaving and going to Rome, where we'll be attending the funeral of Pope Francis. Some of you are going to go. Anybody going? And it's going to be very interesting. We're going to meet with a lot of the foreign leaders. They want to meet. Trade deals are going very well. I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they're coming along, we hope. Very fragile. And Iran, I think, is going very well. We'll see what happens. We're working on plenty of things that shouldn't be worked on because none of this stuff should have happened. This should have been taken place by Biden. It should have been fixed by Biden, but he couldn't do it, nor could he come close to doing it.
The NHL's first round playoff action continued Thursday night with 4 pivotal matchups, each shaping the path toward the Stanley Cup. The Toronto Maple Leafs edged out the Ottawa Senators 3-2 with defenseman Simon Benoit delivering the game winner in just a minute into overtime.
The Canadian Tire Center's rocking. Matthews wins the draw. Benoit scores! Simon Benoit! He set up the winner 2 nights ago, and he has the game winner in Game 3.
Down in the Sunshine State, the Florida Panthers shut out the Tampa Bay Lightning 2-0. Goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky stopped 19 shots, while Anthony Schmidt and Alexander Barkov provided the offensive spark.
Gensel. Barkov wins it back. Sam Reinhart across. Score! The Panthers strike first. Nate Schmidt scored twice in Game 1, and he fires this one past Vasilevsky and cleared. Bennett for the empty net. Score! Sam Bennett with the exclamation point.
And with that, the Panthers now have a commanding 2-game lead in the series. Out west, the Minnesota Wild bounced back with a decisive 5-2 win over the Vegas Golden Knights. Kirill Kaprizov led the charge with 2 power play goals. Check it out.
Kirill Kaprizov looks over the coverage, a shot, he scores! Kirill the Thrill picks up where he left off. It's a power play goal, the Wild off and running.
This victory gives Minnesota a 2-1 series advantage, shifting the momentum in their favor. And finally, the St. Louis Blues delivered a dominant 7-2 performance against the Winnipeg Jets.
And now Thomas there, kept in by Fowler. He works in for Kyrou, right in checks. He scores! What a rocket! Another power play goal, and it's 5-1.
Well, John, another goal up over the glove of Connor Hell.
With that, the Blues cut their series deficit to 2-1. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on X and TikTok. Good night, Canada.